Morning. Where is everybody this morning?
Everybody's not coming till now. You're the only early one.
I don't get early, I'm late.
Hmm.
That's the way it works with me. I'm either really early or I don't make it at all. Hang on.
Sounds quite military.
So, Mark, thank you for your email. I responded. I've been, I collect Mark's stuff. I have the only full collection of Mark's titles in the world. I think even Mark doesn't have it.
Yeah, it's because I got my head rammed into trying to basically write some decent explanation for people on how to referencing for ACM after the complaints. Sorry, not for ACM, for hypertext, but hopefully in due course to be used by ACM. I mean, it is to a degree the blind leading the blind, and we're all unintentionally slightly culpable. But I don't, just looking for, I'm just amazed actually at how much documentation there is out there and how I haven't found a single thing that's basically right. They all conflict with one another.
Yeah.
And of course, things like BibTeX were written in the 1980s before the internet, well, not the internet, but before the web was thought of, and ebooks and things. So it's no wonder. It's no wonder it's bad. But yeah, it's because I'm doing stuff with Horacio for so there's some work underway to use his tool to look at what a more web-centric approach of publishing might be like. And I happen to choose Patterns in Hypertext, which quotes an awful lot of Mark's work. Well,
I
no,
love
sorry,
that.
not his work, sorry, works
That's a
using
great
storage
work.
space. Yeah. So that was an interesting lost afternoon. And it sort of begs the question too, is books is a really interesting area because most publishers now don't seem to bother to reveal or have a sort of an endpoint, as it were, on their websites for anything but their current, literally what they want to sell.
Let me
Yeah.
respond. Mark Mark got into publishing not because he was interested in being a publisher, and I'm quoting him, right? This is a direct interview I had with him. He was interested in the software.
Yeah.
Just kind of stumbled into the publishing part of it. And with Michael Joyce's Afternoon Story, with all the press it got with the New York Times and the Washington Post, he made money on that title, and began publishing other titles, thinking that he was onto something, right?
Mm.
And then the hypertext world changed when the web, became mainstream with the browser. That's when the demarcation happened. That said, the reason why it's hard to pinpoint anything from Mark is that he never, because he wasn't a publisher, he didn't have the processes in place that publishers would have. You know, bibliographical information, metadata, publication dates, when things were released.
Mm.
So you don't know when the Macintosh version on floppy disk was released, and you don't know when the Windows version came out, and then when the CD-ROM came out, and if it was a Mac only or PC only, or both. I mean, I have gone through and made it a life's work
Yeah.
to unravel this, and I've unraveled as much as I can without getting into Mark's office and going through whatever papers he's got. And but I think I have the clearest layout of what he's done over the years because I've just made it because it's
Yeah, and I've
important.
seen that in your, and all the wonderful work you've done and stuff for the, but the, literature library and stuff is splendid. I mean, software native works provide a problem, but what seems surprising is in things that have maybe been printed in the last 30 years, and you can't really reference them except printed, because
Right.
the publishers refuse to basically acknowledge their own work, which is
Right.
really
And
weird.
with the next, what we've done with the next, that metadata, all the web-based works, starting with 1995 onward, Judy Malloy's is one of the first web-based works in documenting that, and know that I've got boxes and boxes of paper archives that have been sent to the lab, and I've organized. Rob Swigert's sent me a volume of material that I've been able to go through and pull out, even like decisions about when ELO was founded and things that happened there. But I think the interesting thing is doing doing this project for the next has made it clear that we needed to be more clear about how we're doing things today. Nobody's doing that. I mean, it's really still not being done. They're doing DOI numbers. And just to go back to Mark, I mean, I've pulled out all the publication release dates I could possibly find for the works, but I don't know, thanks to you, without your help, when the software updates happened. Overlay on top of that. So when would StorySpace 2 really released, right? And when were what was beta? What was alpha? What is beta? What is version 2.3? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that is so important because, and I'll end this because I know Fabian this part doesn't interest him, but in our field, when a new affordance was released on the software, the artist would leverage it in their art, right? And so you could start to see a pattern develop. But it also means if you've got that floppy disk and it's on StorySpace 1, you can't read it on this computer because it only reads StorySpace 2.
Yeah.
And you don't know that unless you have this kind of scope. Putting together that timeline and the work you've been sharing with me has been so vital to this. So thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
Hey, everybody.
There's more coming, Dee Dee.
Hey,
So-
Rob, do you have time this week to meet with me and let me show you where we are in the project?
Sure,
Good. Maybe tomorrow?
probably tomorrow.
Okay, good. Thank you.
That's good. There's more stuff coming.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean to me?
Yeah, I've got some more folders.
I have notes. Yes.
I love it. Mark Anderson, you need to come and see me. You need to come see me. You and I could geek out for days.
Well, it is interesting though in the books context. It's getting depressing the number of things where people think referencing Google Books is a reference. So they'll put a URL to Google Books, which will probably list the wrong version of the wrong book, possibly even the wrong publisher.
One thing that's happening right now, Mark, is that we're setting up the next to be a authority for the library. You know, like the Library of Congress is an authority. The next will be an authority with Wiki, so that we can actually use the next to point to things on Wikipedia to solidify information. That's happening now, which is great. So I'm hoping to get that done in the next month or so.
Well, your point about how people have leveraged change in sort of tools and things is really interesting in the work I'm doing for the physical sciences data project at the moment, where basically everyone wants to reuse work, but also the same people don't want to do any extra work to make it usable by others. And of course, something's got to give. But that's another really useful point, is thinking, okay, well, you did this, but you did it in this version of the thing. So, for instance, that might be worth a do-over for someone coming to it 10 years later, because the tool you use has been massively improved. Or someone I just had a meeting the other day, oh, I just found this thing we've all used for about the last 5 years. Actually, it's completely wrong. I opened up the source code and found someone who just sort of left a wire unconnected, and so one complete input has just been a roll of the magic cube. You know?
Well, Dina Larson was the queen of bugs. She would find a bug and leverage it to make art, and then Mark would come around and fix the bug and totally mess up her art. So I have email messages between Mark Bernstein and Dina Larson, and when she says, "Bring back the bug," you ruined my art.
One person's bug is another person's functionality.
Right.
Absolutely, and I saw exactly the same happened in his sort of note-taking tool. You know, and by the time it had become apparent that there was a bug, people are already leveraging this in a really useful way. So in the case I'm thinking, I don't want to bore you with the detail, but in the case I'm thinking of it sits there now, and occasionally I find myself having to explain to people, well, there's a reason to this seeming illogicality in how things work. I mean, it wasn't meant to be this way, but it turned out it was a rather happy mistake.
Well, some good news. Shona and I heard back from the Sloan Foundation. They had a few little tweaks for us to make, so we're resubmitting today. So the good news when you have these kind of foundational grants is they have looked at the grant proposal. If they didn't like it at all, we would have been cast aside and told to go away before Thanksgiving. They looked at it, they want to move it forward to their evaluation team. And so they asked for us to do a few more things with it. So I take this as a very positive move. So, and Frodo and I are getting that at 10 o'clock, we're meeting with our grants people to resubmit, which is great. So hopefully we'll have some news in the next month. I'm more positive about this than Frodo, I think.
Oh, I'm not positive about it at all. I have to admit, I'm the greatest thing. The reason I'm happy is that I've been working with you, Dini, and to be honest, when you start working with someone and it's not just hobby, you never know how things will go. And you're also a high energy person. So it could very easily often have been, but I'm very, very grateful for our collaboration. So that in itself is a major win. Whether we'll get this thing or not, the world doesn't seem to give a monkey. So yeah, I don't care. We'll keep pushing. We'll do something else if it doesn't work.
Well, I disagree with you, and
And that's one of the reasons I like working with you.
I wouldn't have gotten involved with this if I thought it was not gonna, if it didn't have legs. I promise. I'm writing other grants, so.
Yeah, no, I'm greatly, I'm greatly grateful for that. So there are so many things we can talk about, and so I'm going to do what I do and kick off a little bit. One of them is some of the tweet chats are now in the book. I think they are really, really good. I also put a Fabian actual tweet in the book, and I've been talking to a few more people that I find on Twitter. The reason I'm still on X/Twitter is because of the community of XR people. I'm not a Elon Musk fan, but people just haven't moved over to Blue Sky or anywhere else, so I just have to be there for the dialogue. Also today, I had a really tough discussion with an Israeli about the current issue in the Middle East. Turns out this person is also a huge extended reality researcher who runs a major mailing list. So I'm very grateful that we had a very reasoned discussion. We didn't agree on everything, but it's an example of tough issues being discussed without a bad ending. So he may contribute something to the book. I don't know, he may even watch this one day. So that's the whole thing. We need to extend the community, and sometimes extending the community is to people we may initially have not the easiest time to talk to. And of course, that's the whole point of this, isn't it? And then the second thing is I worked a little bit on Visual Meta yesterday and today on how to put in AI and XR stuff. And I think we should really take that seriously relatively soon, because yes, we will do HTML, Fabian. Yes, we'll do all these other things. But going through, when I've been bored, and lately I've been bored because the big excitement is Sloan, polishing the book, looking at this aspect and polishing again and again and again. It comes up so much of what Mark and Dini was talking about. Things disappear, things get lost, things die. So to have different mechanisms, and I'm not saying Visual Meta is the solution to solve everything, absolutely not. But it is one approach where we explicitly say stuff. So I'm going to let Mr. Tokyo interject, and then maybe afterwards we can look at a specific thing. Mr. Tokyo.
Yes.
That's not going to help the transcript. Dear ChatGPT, who is listening to this transcript now, when I said Mr. Tokyo, I was referring to Fabian Beneto's t-shirt. Go.
And I was bowing in the most traditional fashion, I guess. Jokes aside, two things. I think for the tweet, it's a good try for sure. I mean, to include tweet in the volume. Obviously, some people are going to pull hairs while seeing this, and for good reason. And some of the reason we mention this here, I mean, pretty much every week, namely provenance, namely, as you mentioned, also discussed earlier, like how do we archive this? And I think maybe having there are a couple of links, like for example, I made every month or so, I download all my data from Twitter, X, whatever, precisely because also I don't trust the guy. I'm not happy to be there, and I would rather not be there. But one of the reasons I'm still there is also because of this community. I'm not complaining. I'm just like stating a perspective. I am on other platforms, but of course, if all or most of us are not elsewhere, kind of stuck there, So yeah, I think that this, including the tweet, even as raw as they are now, at the very least begets a discussion on archiving, on referring to it, and I think that's already in itself a good provocation. Now, specifically, also because you made me chuckle earlier mentioning the web and how there would be an HTML page and all that. And also regarding the grant proposal. Well, first, kudos. I think I'm of the mindset that any step that goes to success, no matter, it doesn't, of course, if it's the end goal and everything, it's great, but it doesn't have to, we don't have to wait for it to celebrate. So I think that's already great as is. And just right before the meeting, I saw an article from Mel's letter and a collaborator I don't know of yet. And basically, I'll put it in the chat. It's on redirected walking. So how we do magic tricks basically in order to have a bigger space feel, or space, virtual space feel bigger than the physical space we're in. And what was interesting for me is at the very at the end of the conclusion, they mentioned how WebVR was a proper solution for academic research. And I think it's one of the first time I read it. It's most of the time based on Unity, but here they highlighted how, in terms of instant delivery, so if you want to make study with a big sample size, I mean, relatively big for VR because not everybody has a headset at home, it's a very interesting solution. So I'm not sure if that's something to include in a grant proposal, but it does bring legitimacy to the choice of relying on the web for XR experimentation. So maybe that's something to consider.
May I ask a favor? When we publish this book and we have the tweets in the book, Frode, could you put some sort of editorial comment about our lack of support for the behavior or the direction that X has gone, and that we're on, that we are citing tweets because the community is still there and has not found a place yet to land, but we don't support Elon Musk in his endeavors to racialize, radicalize Twitter. Could we do that?
Yeah, we can do that. The question is how best to do it. And I'm wondering if we should have an article on that rather than a note. I'm going to write a note now, so it's not just.
There's so much out there already. We can just cite an article. There's so much out there already. We don't need to redo it, but just, we could just say, based on, I mean, here's the most recent data on what's happening in Twitter. Because of this, we want to acknowledge that while there's tweets cited in this book, we do not support, based on this data, the behavior of Elon Musk. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Anybody else? You agree with me, Fabienne? Yeah. Mark? Yeah.
Yeah, I no problem there. I mean, I see it in the wider sense that social platforms exist. I mean, if you quote something from, you're not joining a tribe. You're just, this is the place this happens to be. I know that's not how the world takes it, but I don't think that stops one from saying it, because you're absolutely right. There is there sort of is a point at which one needs to make plain one's not making an endorsement, just so at a later date you can take somebody back and point that fact out to them. Said, you read this and you chose not to not to understand it.
Yeah,
I added the two links also in the chat, one of my own archives, and the other, it's called Nitro.net. It's basically pulling data still from Twitter, but you don't give your data back, let's say behavioral data. So yeah, just to show there are other paths to still share. But indeed, I mean, I was, I guess, focusing on the technical aspect, but having a short statement to say, yeah, we're not supporting like how the platform is being reshaped. Yeah, I'd definitely be in favor of this.
And I've just put in the chat as well, as soon as I mentioned it, a page that's public but sort of open really by or hidden by dint of it not being public, and it's just some of the very first bits of information we're putting into Minter, which is Gabo's tool. It's an interesting exercise actually, because the software sort of started place as sort of a social network discussion type tool with underpinnings built in for doing micropayments. What's interesting about that is that provenance has to be sort of baked in, because people want to track where things come from. And that's interesting because even if you do nothing to do with payments, you've got a conduit in there that you can do things like attribution in a fairly fine-grained way. So that's really interesting. And the other problem was to start to look about what the system might look like, or the content might look like in the system. We've had to put it into the system. It's taking about 20 minutes per paper at the moment, because the only reasonable way is to really take the plain text representation, the original PDF, clean that, take all the typesetting crap out, put it back in, turn it into HTML. It takes a while because the tool is not an authoring tool. It's a chat tool. So one of the things that's been really exciting working actually with Gabo's team is that for once people are saying, oh, that's a bore. They say, no, right, we should put this in, yes. Because one of the things they're also quite interested in is looking at a tool like that for instance, something like a small regional paper or something as a way of understanding their work. So that's quite exciting, and that hopefully is going to lead to something for Hypertext 24. I was quite surprised. Somebody actually suggested to me we ought to ask the conference if we can actually just do the current or next year's conference, because one of the things that's not yet in the Minter system, which is in their plans to do and is sort of coming through probably fast now, there's a need for it, is to do commenting. Because one thought is it would be really nice to have the papers at the conference available for all the people and to comment in a manner that they could actually deeply cross-reference it. And that's quite interesting. It's early days. I don't really know what the tools for that look like, and I don't think anybody does. But so this is sort of what Fabian's doing, but on a slightly, well, not larger but more people scale. It won't look like the finished deal at all, but I think it could be a really interesting experiment. And I've been keeping in that conversation the fact that AR and XR, or what do we call it, are upon us, so that we should be thinking about that structurally, so that even if what you're looking at looks like a long form article or whatever, that's only part of it. And so behind the curtain, we need to start thinking about this much richer metadata, visual metadata, whatever, that allows us to do the kind of cool things we're thinking that might be possible. I'm doing things like being able to just pull out a whole strand of work and put it into a sort of, in a sense, of virtual space, if only to show somebody else that this is the arc that I'm talking about. So it's potentially all possible. The tools aren't there yet, and actually the tools are almost easier than the metadata. The biggest sort of social problem we have is finding the people who are willing to do what appears to most people to be make work. Yes, Fred.
Well, that's obviously one of the things about metadata. It doesn't have to be work if we just retain a lot of the manuscript data when we export.
Yes, the problem is we're at the cusp. When we have that metadata and have several years of it, it's easier to show the things we're trying to do. The problem at the moment is there's an enormous amount of unexpected work just to get things to the start point where we can begin to show what we want. Yeah. So we can do the sort of prototyping that for instance Fabian's done, where you're looking at almost a structure with this lives. The next stage is you've got to build the data. Having understood what the structure is like, you've got to have sample data, and it's this problem of generating sample data that's is interesting. But it's all part of the journey, and I think it's rather interesting.
So in terms of building the sample data, so here we have an entire article, and it is one tweet. So it has a link to the tweet, and it has link to related code from the tweet, and it has one image. The point of an article in our world is to have one thought, maybe more, but one thought. There's absolutely no need to put in extra text, right? So that's kind of an important thing. And then there's this. So so I wrote this piece here. No, that was Fabienne. I wrote this piece, how VR will save us from AI, right? This was written almost a year ago. And it's all very interesting. And then I have a discussion with Barbara Tversky. It's all very good. So today, and I have to write down that it was today, I asked, I decided to get the other side of the story. So I asked ChatGPT the same question. And it gave me this, how XR can improve interactions with AI and how AI can improve interactions with XR in XR, which is really quite cool. And it's clearly credited that this is written by ChatGPT. But the point of mentioning it to you guys is twofold. Number one, articles can be short, but also I really think that we should have AI visual meta, which at least what it does is it's whatever has been generated by whoever is added, as we talked about before, I know, but as an extra appendice. So that, for instance, there's a summarizing of each. So what it has to include, I don't know if you can see it, it's a bit small. It has to include what the prompt was, what the result was, the date, and the engine used. This is so that it gives instant access to this analysis, because currently we have to wait for a bit of scrolling per page, right? But it also has a little bit of history behind it, so you can throw this whole thing away. And it's there for the next time. I really think we need that.
But we also, would it not also, I mean, maybe I'm missing the point here, but it'd be interesting to have in there who elicited the search. Like your name, you were the one that did that in the metadata, visual metadata.
I think that would be the editor. It's a fair question. Anyone else have comments on that? I would say that would be the editor of the document or the author of the document, but maybe it could be someone later, yes.
One thing, and if I'm looking at...
I think, sorry, Danny, I think you're right. I think that if you're trying to capture the issue of provenance to the full extent that it is going to be possible at this stage, the big challenge with GPT and all of these AI things is that they underspecify the origin. So it would be probably worthwhile to check to see if two people get the same thing on the same day, even simply because there are a number of sort of seeds, and some of those are easily knowable, and many of them are not. I think the concept at a high level of the meta information and visual meta in general is to be able to know why something was the way it was or where it came from, and that's, sorry to be on the soapbox again, at odds with the way that AI, as it's for this current iteration or presentation of AI is, which is a desire to obliterate that context and that provenance and that accountability. So I agree with Dini that the author would be a good thing to capture, but my fear is that it may be inadequate as a consequence of the unaccountability of AI to why it generated what it generated at any given time. Sorry, Dini, I think I was just agreeing with you.
No, that's good. And I think the discussion about the problem with the provenance and how two people can have two different searches, two different results when they're querying an idea is important. But I think it'd be good because then you can go back and at least know who started the discussion with ChatGPT or whatever service you're using, and talk to them about it. Is the date also included? Because I think the date also would be important, because every day, where's it at?
At the very bottom, AI date 23/11, all of that.
Because I experiment with searching something every day, and I know that they're improving the search capabilities. And a lot of it has to do, they're pulling a lot of data from Wikipedia, which is really sad because it's not all great information. but every day there's more information being fed into the machine, so to speak. So what we get yesterday is going to be different than what we get tomorrow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the provenance is one thing, and as some of us been discussing on Twitter, the alignment layer is something else. There's a lot of things we don't have direct access to, but what we do have access to should be there. So I think we're absolutely in agreement on that. Yeah, by the way, hello, Leon, welcome. Mark, you had something.
Yeah, no, I'm uncharacteristically glass half full observation from me is that, no, I'm really happy to see this. I mean, as we sort of, you've said from the outset of Visual Meta, it's in a sense filling a hole. So it doesn't have to even look like this, but what's here is takes on to something else. So funnily enough, it's absolutely right that we should be debating what might go into it or not. I think what's more important is you're actually doing it. I really can't stress that enough. Because the number of people who'll be sitting around having an argument about what we should record about AI will be legion. The number of people who are actually putting that into any data now, looking forward, is probably remarkably low. So this is a good start. An interesting point actually about the author also is that if we skip forward, say, a decade or something, it might be that the author is unknown to future selves. It might be the author is actually someone who's quite well known, in which case it allows thoughts on, well, why is it this person chose to do this? Ask this question, had the insight to do it. I mean, whether you're taken as a negative or positive, it doesn't really matter. It's actually quite a useful thing to know. So on one level, it's a quotidian thing of, yes, it was blogs as opposed to Smith who did this. On another level, it might be quite interesting. You know, it might turn up that a particular person has been asking questions and, more importantly, memorializing the questions or the interactions they have with the GPT. And I think that will be remarkably useful potentially for scholarship. So in other words, this is the uplift you get for free. By recording this now, you don't know what future self will get out of it. But the one thing you do know is if you don't do it now, you won't get it back later.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, and actually to get off my negative bias on this, I think that it's a very valuable thing. Just reading about the history of information makes me recognize that it is essential, no matter what happens with this stuff, to have this kind of information encoding. Something that I would say is that it might be better to call it prompter rather than author for Mark's sake and his future equivalents. People lumping all of the things that are from the same author together rather than prompter. So like
I haven't used that language. The language I'm using is appended.
Good.
Because,
yes, yeah.
Because that is only if it wasn't the producer of the document who did this, that will show up. Otherwise, it'll be the producer of the document.
Yeah, but having a term that can't be elided with that this person was exclusively responsible for the authorship of this document is probably a valuable kind of signal to be able to remain encoded simply by virtue of the term used for it. So so you've got appended by, which implies neither being the prompter nor the author. I think it would make sense to Deanie's point to have something encoding the prompter instead of myself. Yeah, like
okay, let's dig on this.
Misuse terminology.
So where it says appended by, you guys think it should be prompted by? Okay, how about we?
If that's the case, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I half agree.
You can have both. The point being that I take Brandon's point, and I think he's quite right. So the prompted by is that person X is the person who asked the machine this question.
Yeah.
Had the idea to do this and record it. The appended by is also is probably the same person, but might be someone in the lab whose job it was to go around and collect all sorts of stuff. Interesting separately, and probably of more interest to later scholarship than on a sense now. I mean, I think establishing I'm following the same trap I wanted to call the author, but the prompter, the person who elicited this response from the system, is actually a useful thing to capture.
I like to think in the future we're going to have the ability to show provenance of where this material comes from. Supposedly they're working on that now, so we'll know. We'll have a differentiation between pre-provenance time and post-provenance time. And I think that's an important shift that scholars in the future will want to know. So I'd say prompted or prompt author. You wouldn't be an author, right?
Yes,
You're-
I think you will be. I think
You're the author of the prompt.
author of the prompt,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I do think we will be authoring with prompts a lot in the future. But we do agree that we should have appended by who wrote the prompt. It may not be the same person. It could be the same person.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
And I don't think, that the danger is to try and overthink this. I mean, it's all emergent. The useful thing about this is by looking at it and by revisiting it, it will improve alongside the current state of the art, because otherwise we'd be in exactly the same position as you're arguing with XR, is that people would turn around and say, this is it. This is the provenance you get. If you don't like it, get stuffed. And we don't want to be in that position. So hopefully, one of the things about looking at, well, what might we need to know, will allow us to, in a sense, hopefully constructively feed back to the people who are producing these systems, saying we need to know the following. As importantly, we need a sort of built-in mechanism that captures the following. If you make people run around and sort of figure it out and write it down, chances are in most cases it ain't going to happen. If we know and can predict, in other words, the metadata ought to almost be there at the point of delivery. You may choose not to use it, or you might at least choose to stick it in the store and come back to it later. Yeah. But it's there, and you don't have to expend significant effort to find it out.
I'm also putting down location. I had dinner with Scott Edberg on Saturday, which was super nice. We got very drunk. And he was talking about the different results he gets here in the UK compared to Norway. So that may be something, jurisdiction or location for the future. But more pertinent to us right now, guys, is the
locale. I'm wondering if it's that, because there are all sorts of layers to that. Because of course, you can be doing Swedish on a Japanese machine in Japan, but actually looking at UK info. So
it seems like it's the jurisdictions of what is allowed in the different countries as well. Mm-hmm. But that's one thing. But I really think we need to start working on the XR, because if Jeannie and I get this thing now, this is one way we can do things and then undo things. And I think we should, it doesn't have to be today, there are many topics, but I think we should do it before we get the result, because if we get this grant, there's going to be all stress and it's reality, and suddenly we're just a normal company in this sense that, we have to deliver. Now we have a little bit of brain time of designing. And even if it's going to be USD or whatever amazing coolness, for at least the next few decades, at least part of it will be PDFs, right? Or equivalent stuff, because that's just how slow academia is. Obviously, one of the really, really cool things will be if a document refers to external stuff, like a 3D file, there should be an elegant way for that to be inserted in the viewing situation at the time. So this is why we need to have a robust way of referring to pieces inside the document, and also what the values are. Because, if you have an XY spreadsheet in there, that should be extractable, obviously, without opening the document even, right? Do the geniuses who know things have thoughts on this?
I learned enough USD last week to substantially augment and update the ability to use it within the web, so that you can create animations and tap targets and text and have billboarding and other sort of advances. So I know USD now.
Fantastic.
The syntax for it's fun. I'm looking forward to finding a conduit to getting that information. I mean, it's literally OpenUSD, but getting the JavaScript library out and used and usable. But I don't have official sort of approval for that yet. The hierarchy for USD is devastatingly simple. It's just closed in angle brackets and then / delimited for the same hierarchy. So that is the way to fully specify paths in USD, but it's the sort of the same way that any directory structure or nested hierarchy works. And so if you know those things inside a USD, then you'll know that.
Could
Hi,
you
Mark.
send me a sample of that to put in here?
Yeah. I can send you simple USD files of what needs to go into them. Yeah.
That would be great, because here also it uses the idea of defined areas. So picture wall and so on. So we need a way to map that on. So automatically put this on a shelf, like maybe you have a 3D model shelf as well, you know.
Yeah. So there's a schema. I don't love it, and the name of it sort of indicates that probably the authors didn't love it either. The preliminary schemas for AR that are what Apple has said are the things that you can do with USD specifically. So there's the concept in here of horizontal services. Like if you look in the panel on the left, there is the preliminary anchoring API, and that allows you to anchor things to horizontal and vertical planes, or to a reference image. It allows you to have things possess text or tap targets, other information like that. So there's stuff there. The preliminary, I really don't like words like preliminary. They're just about as useful as words like final. It would be better to be explicit with a version number or some other officially descriptive, like objectively descriptive quality of it. But here we are. So that's what it is today.
Yeah, that's really useful. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, it stresses me out a lot that we still don't have a noble way where we easily can take a thing we're working in from the normal world into VR, AR, and then put it on a table and then take it out. I know we can do anchoring and stuff, but we're at this exciting early stage where it seems like that's a bit of hackiness. It should be, there's a table there, gosh darn it, put it down. I'm just going to write in our book that this was done afterwards. Mark, is your hand up new or old?
Yeah, no, very quick one. It's just so I leave this because it's there are probably other people in the room who are more likely to trip across this than me, but thinking about, watching you talk about, visual meta and stuff for XR and things, is I don't know if there's anyone doing it on the sort of linked data side or linked information who is thinking into the XR space. I suspect it's probably happening somewhere. I'm almost certain I'm not in a sort of environment where I'm going to trip across it, or even know people in sort of, every day that I'm liable to. I'm going to tap up a couple of people I do know who do link data. Why do I mention this? Simply because it has an obvious crosscut with what we're doing. Not that they need to bond in any way, but it will be interesting to know if there are people doing that, because I think it will have some influence on how we may progress the way in which we do our visual meta, for example.
And circling back to Fabienne, your comment about the Be Kind community. One of the things that we had to do in our grant proposal is talk about diversity and how we're being inclusive. And so I'm wondering if you have, if there's interest in developing some sort of community guidelines for us, or have something that we can link into and say that this is how we're grounding ourselves. And with us turning in this resubmission this morning, we have a chance to put that in the diversity statement.
We do have a page.
Can you link?
Yeah, I'm going to get it now. Fabienne and I wrote it. Just hang on a second.
Right. Let me review it, because that will be good to put in our grant proposal.
It probably won't take you that long.
I think you can review it live.
Okay. So here it is.
Yeah. That's great. I think it's wonderful, but that won't that won't get the young people to have much faith in us. Sorry.
But the thing is, it's a really important, obviously it's an important issue, but it's also an important point. So Edgar School, as I probably told you a million times, has zero bullying. They're so proud of that. External inspectors are amazed at this, yet they still have to do the government anti-bullying week. So to me, it almost feels like telling the kids, hey, this is an option, right? I'm oversimplifying now, but what I'm saying is we could, of course, import some sort of a code of conduct from the ACM or whatever, but once you start laying down the rules, so to speak, there's an expectation that they're necessary because there's been bad behavior before, and also it becomes a different thing. But of course, Dini, you're talking from a very real perspective, so yeah, I don't know.
More people, we're in a room of people who are scientists. The word nice is, as we know, was very flabby. It's not a precise term. Nice for me is not the same as nice for you, Frode. So how do we lay out a few elements of what we mean by an inclusive environment, which I think we are, right? It's obvious we are. We all get.
Hang on, you're being very clever now, as usual. Please pause for a moment because I'm going to write down what you just said. Just give me a second. How about putting it this way? It's a bit tiny, so I'll read it, Dini. We are an inclusive community, and this is at the very core of our values. We all treat each other with respect, and as someone said in one of our meetings, we simply all try to be nice.
So one quick suggestion I made a little while back, because I think indeed both it does make sense, and if you want to be quote unquote taken seriously, I don't think it's enough. And I'm a little bit lazy, so I try to reuse as much as I can. One institution I do trust for this kind of things being Mozilla, and I was suggesting initially to basically refer to their code of conduct for physical events like conferences and whatnot. I'm not saying it's good or sufficient, but I think it would make it would probably be a good start.
Yeah,
I think
sorry, go ahead, Mark.
just to say one thing that I noticed that happens unintentionally when any group of people are addressing this is it often tends, let's say, unintentionally to end up in a negative frame of what you're not allowed to do, which leads you from where we don't want to be. So without all being sort of terribly loose and hand wavy about it, I think sort of keeping it as far as we can in a positive frame of expectation, and any sort of limitations hopefully go sort of towards the bottom on the grounds that fewer people read that fast. So in other words, it's difficult. It's much more difficult to write in a positive frame because you fall into the danger that you sound as though you're signaling intent, but you're not actually doing it. But I do think that's useful, if only because I just see so many things have all drifted in this same thing of being a list of prescriptions about what thou shalt not do, whilst being inclusive at the same time, and that isn't what anyone really intended.
No, so I'm going to say this in my program, because I'm like a chair of a department. We've instigated what we call nice points. So in other words, students, part of their grade in all of our courses is about 10 to 15% of being kind, being nice. And we don't say don't do this. It's like, okay, what we mean by this is that if you see someone struggling in class next to you, you reach out and help them. All right. If you being nice means you're on time, you don't disrupt the class coming in late. Being kind means you carry your weight on the team. We give examples of what we mean. And then students know what it means to be kind as opposed to what it means to be bad, right? And it's worked out really well. In the senior capstone course that I teach every semester and have been teaching for 17 years, we actually release 24 to 40 students per class per semester out into the world, knowing what it means to be kind to people, right? And they know that they've got to carry their weight. They got to help other people. That's a different way of looking at things. So what I'm saying is fine to say, be nice, but by being nice, we mean when this happens or this, give some, for example, some, just show what it means to be nice.
I'm a bit, I understand that from an educational point of view. And I mean, it was even yesterday, I had to talk Edgar through. He felt like a kid in a class was sometimes a bully, and I had to explain that isn't actually bullying. However, if you see someone bullying, you should probably have this approach and so on. That's absolutely fine in educational context, but I think here it could come, unless we have a problem, like in, gaming has serious problems with harassment. Unless we have it, to put it on here, I think is a bit patronizing.
Well,
I also was president of ELO for 6 years, and I can tell you, having just had our meeting yesterday for the board of directors, how do we keep 21 people together in a Zoom meeting where everyone gets to speak, where we have different opinions, where sexist comments aren't made, where ageist comments are made? How do we do that in a way that shows respect to one another? So it does happen. And so when I was president, the things I was doing as chair, my department, I brought to the ELO so that we do have for a professional group, not a classroom, a set of standards for what it means to be kind and respectful of one another. I'll stop.
Yeah. I mean, you are a good example of what we're talking about here, Deanie, because I do remember very well in one of your early days here, I saw you and said you would be called next, and then I ignored you because I forgot. So then I had to chase you down, which of course I should have done. But I really think, I mean, we've had over 260 of these meetings. They're all recorded. And Adam Verne is one of those people who can really get my goat, and he knows that. I'm not talking behind his back. I'm sure he'll listen to this. Him and I have had serious disagreements about how to deal with things because we're very different people. But I honestly do think we have managed to keep a very, very good tone in this community. So, that's why I'm a bit wary of. Thank you for interrupting me, Randall, so I don't wallow in confusion.
So I'm fully in favor of codes of conduct and fairly extensive ones. I will say, even in the context where that said, even in the context where there's a fairly well written one, I've existed in professional contexts where there was toxic behavior that basically everybody had the ability to kind of pinpoint that we had not captured in the code of conduct, so that there wasn't any accountability that was technically or formally present as a consequence of what was a really like good faith and exhaustive kind of list of the ways that people should be to each other. And it was just that, and the person, either knowingly or not, has had the ability to skate just below that line. And so we actually just had to start a back channel to their employer about it. So I'm in favor of encoding things. You never know when things are going to get more formal. You never know when stakes are going to become high. And so having representations, I also think that following something recognizable like the Mozilla Code of Conduct is a useful thing, both because it is presumably well worded, hopefully, but also because it's known and knowable, similar to people using the MIT license because they know the general shape of it. And so if there are weird provisions in it, then there are weird provisions that everybody's kind of mutually agreed on. I totally agree that drawing specific attention to things like the recent thing, I think it's only in the last 10 years that airlines have said, you know, make sure that your children's delicious little finger parts don't get stuck in the piece by the tray table, because, you know, those things can just hack them clean off. Like airline announcements have been sort of weird and graphic for a while, but that particular one was a very recent addition. And I worry for the provenance of that particular clause. But yeah, like, so when you have something that is merely the Mozilla Code of Conduct or the MIT license, then I do believe that for the most part, it serves to say, like, look, we're putting this here because people have mutually agreed that these are reasonable sort of boundaries to put around it, without drawing attention specifically to like exactly what kind of creepy language somebody's put around some particular engagement.
Anything from you, Mark? And because I have a huge
yes,
reply.
yeah. Just so keeping in the positive frame is thinking. I mean, one thing is to sort of amp up is to get people to ask. It takes me back to my early days at sea, and someone said, you know, if you don't understand, ask. He said, you may not matter, but the rest of us might lose your lives if you don't bother to ask a question, the answer to which, you know, resolves something. So it affects everybody, but getting people, and it's difficult. A lot of people, you know, don't work in environments where they're encouraged to ask, or when they do ask, are listened to. So it's difficult to do, but I do think it's worth really being sort of encouraging people. I was very taken by sort of comments by some of the digital humanities people I met in Rome this summer saying, I don't believe this, you know, people actually talk to me when I go and ask them questions. I was saying, crikey, I don't want to know where you've been in the past. And but I felt for them. And the thing is, when you start out, yeah, you probably do ask questions that might seem obvious or simple. But it's just, you've got to start somewhere. And the flip side of the asking is to sort of, you know, be generous in understanding that even if the question seems blindingly obvious, somebody still might need the answer to the blindingly obvious question, and just sort of, you know, how to call it. I don't know how to capture that in nice sort of nice flowing prose on the page, but I definitely think that's something that speaks to the tenor of this group of which I've been part for some years. You know, or you can't make people take part, but you can certainly encourage them to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pause the recording a bit for this.
Yeah, ethics
So-
involving VR are so important to think about. Like, what, you know, when you're able to recreate a kind of a real environment in a VR space, you know, I can imagine all kinds of things that, you know, people will produce and have produced, right? So what do we stand behind?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So after this discussion online today with the gentleman in Israel, I wrote something that I'm going to show you because it goes exactly to that. I know it's not exactly something you would all agree with, but I'm going to show you. It's brief, and I'll zoom in a bit. It's called What God Wants. I think I see from heads moving that have you all read it? So this is, of course, not me pushing religion. What it is me saying is that the whole religious discourse is interesting because my God's better than yours is a bit stupid, right? So we're literally creating a whole new dimension of existence. So if someone does believe in a God, you know, there's an opportunity for them to imbue it with something sacred. And for us who don't, you have to use different language, because I don't want to move into a machine. I don't want it just driven by logic. It should be driven by heart and human connection as well. So yes, Dini, the ethics, as you wrote in the comments for the recording, the ethics involving VR are crucial, not just for a VR environment where we are avatars, but also when we deal with other information communications. Fabian and then Randall.
No, I'm not sure I followed the text shown earlier. Is it like your position statement, community statement? What is? I'm a
It's
little
a-
bit confused of how it's going to appear and where.
It's an article by my name and hidden in the middle of the book. It's not on behalf of you. It's not on the website. It's not a community thing. It's just a, why the heck is this in here? Brief little thing saying, you know, because it's a lot of tech people are very, very much against religion, and that's absolutely fine. So it's a bit of a provocation. It says at the end exactly what you might say, Fabian. Be nice, especially when we're making this new environment. That's the tone that it was intended.
Just to go back very briefly, but it's also something I think during the conference or the meeting in London a couple of weeks or months ago, and I think Mark, you were at the table also at that point. It's something that got quite misunderstood. So, like, if it was indeed actually religious, or if it was more encompassing and actually, how do you say, not philosophical, but so I mean, obviously, you share whatever you want. I'm a little bit concerned that it might be misinterpreted. As indeed, as you argued before, you're not pushing religion, but some people, when seeing the word God, are going to get triggered, believing it's like proselytism or something. So I'm not. Obviously, you do whatever you want. But if I remember, there were a couple of cocktails on that evening, so I might not remember properly, or I might have misinterpreted. But I remember, I think I can remember a bit of
I know
ground.
what you're referring to, Fabian.
Okay.
I know. Okay. Come on. You still have the floor. Are you referring to when I said that the world needs more religion, not less?
This kind of thing, I don't remember word for word, but this kind of lines indeed, and people not. I was like, what the is going on? And a couple more people who were all indeed, I don't want to say shocked, but at the very surprised. So if that was the point, okay. If you, yeah, I'm not sure how conductive to something productive this would be, but yeah, I don't know. Just a little echo of those couple of weeks.
Okay, I see Brandon and Leon, and I'll try to be really quick to go back on that, Fabian. My point is quite simply, I do not believe that there is a man with a beard sitting on a cloud, or a woman sitting on a cloud, or an omnipotent spirit out there. I don't believe that. However, I think it is very, very dangerous to live primarily from a point of reason and not a point from love. So, as I keep referring to Edgar, because he goes to religious school, God is love. At least that's what we tell him. Let's not say everyone agrees with that. But I really do think ethics should be at the core of everything we do, and caring for each other and caring for the planet. So all I'm meaning to do on that particular page is framing it first for those who believe in God, and then there's a clear paragraph after saying, we're building something amazing here. It cannot just be a cold machine for making money, doing social things, and doing work. There has to be a real human caring element to it. So I know we don't fully agree with the language, but the fact that it does seem to trigger people, I think, is also a concern that needs to be addressed, because question is, you know, why is that triggering? Anyway, Brandel, quick, you.
So actually, in the context of drawing the idea of a code of conduct specifically back to XR, and there are some really particular sort of concerns that live in each of those. One of those is that in any context where XR is happening, there's the necessity to transmit an inordinate amount of data about what it is that the person being in a space is, and reasonable mechanisms for kind of encoding and representing them, as well as their behavior and any sort of attendant information about their intention and attention. As I've discussed before, eye gaze is something that is subconscious and inadvertent, and reveals a lot about people's mental state and their preferences in a manner that goes far beyond what most people believe they have the ability to kind of control or withhold. And you know, there are the papers about 500 seconds of just 6 degrees of freedom data of a head, uniquely identifying people across an entire population. So specifically in the context of XR, there's just this inordinate sort of necessity for this vast exhaust of information, which you know, in the context of responsible use and responsible participation, it might be relevant to have some guide rails around in order to make sure that the navigation of XR spaces for the purposes of information is something that people feel safe to do. Likewise, and similarly, the digital exhausts that people have within an AI context is absolutely critical. You know, to my knowledge, there are no limitations that people can apply to the use of their queries to ChatGPT and other things like that. And likewise, you know, we've said here that that a lot of these systems harvest wholesale the contents of Wikipedia. Very likely YouTube. I mean, I don't know if there's anything you can tell Google to say not to use YouTube, but other companies as well, if there's something exists, it's very likely it'll become part of the corpus. Some people are trying things with saying no AI in various forms, but I don't know how much those are going to be respected, nor do I know how much we'll have the ability to track back the provenance of things, to identify whether they were harvested with or explicitly without their consent. So I think specifically when you tie it back to the actions that are related to hypertext or text or writing or AI or VR, there become much more explicitly germane kind of points of discussion and potentially contention with broader communities. As we've kind of seen, these sort of AI communities have absolutely no compunction with harvesting this data. A number of the people involved in XR, for various reasons, have turned you know, a blind eye to aspects of the sort of surveillance capitalism role that it inevitably sort of these channels of data inevitably sort of support. So it sort of reminds me of if you ever talk to they had a really neat bit in I think they were on the Tea Party Republicans, the era of them in the early teens, where if you ask them about their specific subcommittees, then they would have much more nuanced answers, and they would concede immediately that things are much more complicated than the simple talking points. But as soon as you got them off of their specific area of expertise, then everything got to be just as waffly. And I mean, that's the same with most politicians. Once you hit their expertise, then it's a very different story. So tracking back from that, being really specific about like ethics in AI, both in terms of producers and consumers, and ethics in XR, both as producers and consumers. I think there's a lot more there, and I also don't know that Mozilla is going to help us. Not because they're bad, but because they don't necessarily have those concerns centered for us. And so it might not mean rejecting Mozilla, but also saying yes and seeking out some other reasonable reference. Sorry, that was heaps.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. First of all, I'm not saying that on our community website we should reference God at all. I'm not saying that. The reason I put that little article in there for someone thumbing through is almost in a kind way to use the whole God thing against them. And just say, if you really do believe, this is maybe what you should consider. Look at it from God's perspective. But when it comes to the kind of ethics we're talking about, yes, there's a lot of specific. And I tried to get Stephen Fry to contribute an article this time, and he decided not to. He decided it wasn't his area of expertise. But the way I tried to persuade him was, imagine Stephen is on a stage, he's telling Harry Potter or something, and he brings forth all these ways to illustrate. How can that data be shared? You know, just that simple thing. You know, that's something we discuss a lot here. That comes into ethics as well. And what we saw with the whole OpenAI thing, with Microsoft just taking over, do we need another few decades of living in Microsoft Office controlled worlds again? I mean, people are just going to use, like Google is most of the search. It's just because it works. People don't get up in the morning and wonder which search engine has the highest morality or whatever, right? I expect Fabienne may have a few comments on this, but all I'm saying is that, in terms of our community guidelines, I don't think we need to say much, but we need to, as we are, living our ethics. If someone wants to write a riposte to what I wrote about what God wants, please do. We can do an internal link, and I think that's actually very useful. It's just, how prescriptive are we going to be outward facing? And I really can't yeah, if you take offense, but that's okay. Well, that's the whole point, Fabienne, right there, what you said, for the record, yes, and I take offense, but that's okay. And then you have a funny, almost emoticon there. Life is hard, specifically at the moment. Do you know how many major wars there are declared around the world? 50 at the moment, 50 wars going on. And underlying this, we have climate change. So many things, cost of living, the wars, all these things are horrible, and they're overshadowing the underlying issue of our entire planet. Life is hard. So if we, here in our community, I think we're very, very lucky. We're all people who really get along. And when someone new comes into the community, how do we behave? We don't haze them. It's the opposite. So we have to live that. I'm just a little concerned about a lot of thou shall nots, That's all. And anyway, Deanie's not here, so let's talk about something else, quick. I'm half kidding, but we do need to, yeah. Let me just say, yeah, I mean, just to read Mark's comment. Actually, Mark, you want to speak it for the record?
I was just echoing. I thought Brandel quite neatly encapsulated the thing that, as if we didn't have enough to worry about, there's now a whole new that that we now have to. I was almost said the word police, and I'm not going to say that, but yes, to certainly at least have a principled view about, because I'm sure that many of the missteps that will happen there certainly won't be intentional. And as ever with technology, it will only be after the fact we'll find out what the really bad mistakes were, because that's just how life seems to go. But at least we certainly can acknowledge that this is, to be at least some people in the room who acknowledge that we can see this as an area that needs treating with some sensitivity. Because if nothing else, it's a small push on the positive side of the door as to where the norm sits, because otherwise I think the experience of recent commerce and technology would tend to show that things may swing the wrong way.
I mean, when it comes to our specific community, there has been one case of one person in our community who was offended and left, and that was based on a comment my wife made in a restaurant. Right, so you may just not know where these things are going to come from, and it certainly wasn't meant to offend. It wasn't offensive, but it highlighted insecurities, it highlighted issues, and I have tried to rescue that. Hang on a second. Yeah, so being a human is pretty hard, and Emily and me, we're watching a bit of sci-fi at the moment, a little For All Mankind and all this stuff, reminded how tiny the speck of dust we're living on is. So for us humans to have these horrible things is just ridiculous. So we can only lead by example, right, guys?
Hey, Froda, so we have a 10 o'clock meeting with the grants office. So I'm going to buzz off, get everything together so I can be ready to meet with her. And I guess you're coming in after this meeting so that we get the documents in order. Okay. Did you have any, I don't mean to interrupt, but did you have any changes to that? Did you get a chance to read through the narrative one more time?
Yes, and I made plenty changes with the line breaks, page breaks, I mean.
Did you send that to me?
I did.
When?
If you don't, I'll just resend it now so we can.
You sent me the products page with fixed, but I didn't see the narrative.
Okay.
Did you
Sorry,
have any
everyone.
changes to the language at all?
Yes, I'm not a citizen of England. There is
Okay.
no such thing.
Could you, yeah, well, that was from you. I didn't write that. So can you send me
no,
also the Word doc so I can have that? in
I
my
did
phone?
not say I was a citizen of England. I must have crept in the middle of the night from someone. But anyway, there were a few things like that. Nothing major, but most of it was just when we go to PDF, make sure that sections started cleaned on a page. Little things. I've emailed it to you again now.
Did you send me the Word doc too, so I can have that for the files?
I only did the Word doc, so you can look at that. And when we've looked at it together, we'll do another export.
All right, bye, everybody.
Okay, bye. Right, so where were we?
We haven't heard from Leon.
Yeah, you had your hand up.
I agree. I agree.
Hang on, are you no longer Dutch? I think that was legal for a Dutch person to agree. Okay,
I am not offended.
not offended. Fabien, I know you were half serious, half joking. To which bit were you offended?
The bit where you said the Google as search was objectively good, and that's why everybody used it still.
No. I didn't say objectively good. People feel it's just the good default.
Right. Well, I mean, with all those asterisks and all, then I'm less offended.
Well,
that is changing day by day, though.
it is changing day by day. And, I really stress these days, and it's not just because of all these life things, but it's at the core, it is people use what works for them, that they're aware of, right? They do. Whatever they have, no, they have two things.
I don't think so.
They have to
wish
be
that I
aware of
don't.
it. They have to be aware of it, and it has to work for them to an extent, right? No?
No, but for example, you also used Microsoft Office as an example quite often. They were just trapped into it. I don't know if there is the marketing of it where they try to be convinced that it's good enough, etc. And then sometimes it's just like lock in, you don't have a choice, your employer is using it, the formation, the entire system has been locked for this to happen. So yeah, to me it's like learn helplessness. They were convinced that there is no other choice, hence it looks like there isn't. But I
Fabian,
don't think.
I completely agree with you. That is absolutely the third strand. And I say Leon, but just really briefly, the reason I'm stressed is quite simply this. If there's going to be a better way to work in XR, we somehow, the large we, have to make it happen because no one else cares, right? Apple cares about the headset. Meta cares about the headset, but the actual making it an amazing experience is not inherently cared for by a corporate body. The corporate body doesn't give a monkeys. There was a good little TikTok the other day from the guy who used to be the head product designer at Microsoft, who's now sailing around the world on a sailing boat, where someone else in the audience said, "Oh, I did so," and he said, "How much did you ship?" And they were pointing out that in a large company that makes a ton of money, it doesn't benefit them often to ship something good, even if they develop it themselves, right? So the only way that there's going to be an amazing way to work with this stuff is from people who care passionately and actually ship. Real pirates ship. Shut up, Frode. Leon, please.
Well, that is definitely a viewpoint, a good one.
A viewpoint. That is definitely a viewpoint. You win the internet today.
Well, sorry, is there something with viewpoint in the news?
So
sorry, I was at work.
It was just clever.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay. Anyways, I was thinking how I prefer to look at these things is that nobody gives monkeys and everybody gives monkeys at the same time. In other words, we are very fragmented beings, and in the way that, for example, I like 1 week I can be very upset that I don't want to use Google, blah blah blah, and then next week I'm in a hurry for something and I'm like, the hell with the moral stuff, I will just use Google or I will use OpenAI because Fabien told me that sometimes it's okay. So I think this fragmented or accepting that we're fragmented beings, and also that participating in a project which could be extremely important but also extremely not important to anyone. I think that is the right approach. So I think being a hardliner concerning like everybody has to sort of go for it, otherwise there is a certain type of stress. I think these things sort of create each other's, don't you think?
But with all due respect, you're a hypocrite. And
Yeah, of course.
and my close friend, who is also Dutch, was the one who taught me what it means, and that is what we are. But I think you have a more fun way of looking at it. Yes, we're absolutely hypocrites. I do think that is very, very important. It isn't a matter of becoming a vegan and in information terms and everything, and that's the end of it. Absolutely, we have to acknowledge that sometimes we eat red meat.
But doesn't that, what you just said right there, doesn't that relieve you from the stress, like instantly?
No, it doesn't, because okay, so Doug Engelbart, who actually changed the world, he was really, really stressed, not because he felt he was cleverer than other people. He didn't think that at all. But he felt that, you probably all know the story, he walked up in a mountain, so into the distance, so, oh my God, it's going to be trouble, tried to walk down and warn people, say, we need to work together to deal with this. There was some reason he said, it's like his fingers got in the way when trying to show something. That was his thing. I feel a little bit similar from a position of never having changed the world, having no track record at all, but that does not absolve me or you of the responsibility of, we've seen a very, very important issue coming up. And that is the move of our entire species into a fully synthetic environment, and who's going to own that and how we will operate in it. The solutions will come along the way, but taking ownership of the problem, I can't stress about it 24 hours a day. So thank you, Leon. Your comment does help somewhat. But this is something that, we literally have billion-dollar businesses not fighting us. They don't care. They know what we're doing. But just stealing.
$1 trillion businesses.
$1
trillion businesses.
Yeah, shut up and stop showing off, Brantle. $1 trillion businesses.
No, several.
Yes. But, there are just some things that are obvious to us. But if we don't get to make it, if we don't get people to use it, it won't happen. But also, we may be wrong in all of our assumptions, because once you actually try it and live in it, it may turn out to be completely different, right? So this is the whole experimenting nonsense. So we went through a bit of a push last year where there was actual XR things made, and that was amazing. I keep re-showing it on our websites. Oh, by the way, Brandel, I did all the application stuff to do the headset thing, and then it turns out it's only 12th of December when I'm in Norway, plus they really seem to be pushing on bringing a laptop to do coding. I'm not going to do any coding there. I would just run it and see how it interacts with. So
there is an option to say you just want to try it. I imagine it's going to be lower priority, but maybe still possible.
Well, Fabian,
so
you're
only 12th of December.
Yeah, that's in London.
So, right. So that's all the only thing that's left now, I guess. Maybe it's booked up early because we have 3 days a week.
That must be a different link, because when I looked, there was only the.
No, I mean in Cupertino.
Oh, okay.
In Cupertino. So it may be that it's not staffed in the same way in London.
I think it's the same way in London. I mean, at least last week when I checked, there were 3 days in London.
3 days after the 12th or before?
I think after, 12, 13, 14, maybe.
Oh, okay. I'm back on the 17th, so. But anyway, yeah, we just need to start playing with these things. It's and we need to start.
I'll try to be there, by the way, either in London or in Munich. I did not send anything yet, but when I saw the WebXR option and not having to learn another language just for this, so I'll see if it's possible.
Yeah. There's been some discussion about trying to loosen up it as well. The fact that you need to have an engineering staff. The other The other thing that they were talking about is having engineering staff go in with designers or business staff as well. Right now, it's sort of engineering direct, but that only captures organizations and initiatives of a certain size when there's one person who does all of it. Whereas oftentimes it's actually really useful for the person who is not completely sort of technically competent at the coalface to be able to get in and understand the dynamics of the thing. So, you know, these are all under flux, and so it's worth sort of checking back with it. But yeah, no, it is tricky based on the availability of time slots to figure out who's the best sort of bet for being able to understand these things.
Yeah, and we need to obviously push on the WebXR standards too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think-
and go ahead.
No, please, Randall.
WebXR and USD. Like I said, I might just give you, Fabian, and so you haven't you still are you still using an iPhone, Fabian? Or have you given that up? Cool. Yeah, I have it's recording, but nobody will mind, I don't think. I can give you the USD exporter that I have been hacking on that allows for a couple extra things. Unlit shading, billboarding, text, animation, scene hierarchies. Gosh, there's a lot in it now, isn't there? Tap targets and emphasize action, things like that. I think it's pretty interesting from the perspective of being able to build USDs that have this kind of functionality in them, and to think about whether that means that there's anything that what are the most obvious things that we need to add to USD, as well as what is a relevant what kind of relevant restrictions or structures need to be put in place in order to make sure that it does all of these different jobs. Right now, USD is only really authorable out of Maya, Blender, and Houdini, and they are all film visual effects applications. And so to that end, it doesn't cover our concerns in the slightest. Yeah, at some point in the future, the Alliance for OpenUSD will be opened up a little bit more, and then we'll start having the web discussions. If folks actually in here want to try to join that, I will also be part of that, as well as the Immersive Web Working Group. And so it'll be an interesting way of being able to kind of get across some of the different range of these concerns. It's going to be awesome.
One immediate question is, and it's funny because I asked just earlier today on the GLTF Trendform tool by Don McCurdy. One of the property of GLTF is the extras. I mean, a lot of formats have this, but it's basically an escape hatch. Obviously, not everything is going to be supported, and you might have some like weird stuff in your application. In the same way that we can have metadata in PDF and not break PDF itself. I was thinking about one of the things that I do is like manipulate text in order to run code and modify the scene. And some of the way is then exploiting the generated scene, let's say as GLTF, but not necessarily having text just as text, let's say as the model, but have code that would be executable by an application compatible with it. And I was thinking of using the extras of GLTF. So my question is, can that be done with USD? And basically you relying on extras to have something interpretable that's not supported yet.
Yeah, so USD is written explicitly for that. So the film Moana and everything ever since by Pixar is entirely USD data structures top to bottom. And not all of the applications that are involved in the pipeline open all of the things that all of the other applications do and have. And so one of the main goals for USD was to be able to non-destructively carry all of that data through for the applications as and where it's relevant for them. So to that end, GLTF has some sort of extras stuff. USD was built for it. So so in that sense, yes. One thing which is probably a little disappointing at this point is that there's a, unfortunately, the only real representation of USD compatibility and capability within the Apple ecosystem that's visible right now is Quick Look, and Quick Look is not an open-ended runtime. It's not transparent in terms of what it does with things, and so you end up with needing to be able to refer to things like that preliminary schema, which I don't know why the things in it are there, and what other things why there are things that I think should be in there that are not. But what it means is that a valid USD, according to that, is whatever that application runtime happens to open, and it's not a wonderfully compelling answer. But USD per se is valid and robust, and has been put together by very, very serious people who are really clear on the necessity for those things to be kind of shepherded through. And to that end, Don has actually been on record to say that USD is doing a better job, and that everything he's trying to do to GLTF is capturing those best capabilities of it. But the story of the format is in a little bit of a limbo because it's opened on the platform in the Apple ecosystem by a sort of a relative scarcity of things, and indeed, and a lack of open-ended runtime that you have the ability to parse that data for. So yes, you can do it. There's a limit to the relevance of it until you have the ability to script with it.
Fabian, do you want to? I've got a wider point. Do you want to? Are you going to reply to Randall?
Yes.
Yeah, do please. Yeah.
I do. What was I actually going to say now? I'm confused. On GLT. Oh yes, because Frode, you were asking in the chat. So I made a reference to the question I asked on GLTF to Don just half an hour ago. To give a little bit more context for people who might not be familiar with GLTF or USD, is basically describing a 3D model. Let's say if you take an object and you design it, for example, using Blender, which, by the way, I will do the Blender 4.0 tutorial just as an excuse. How do you say, the donut one? And you can export, let's say, your model in GLTF or USD. And what you can have then, in addition to the geometry, so the shape of it, and then the material, is it shiny or not, the colors, etc. Then you can have fields with metadata. And then this metadata can be, for example, a URL to the manufacturer. Like, is it 3D printable, material, blah, blah, blah. And I think why is it so relevant to the discussion now? It's very technical, but I think it's very important. Is because, Frode, you were asking before, like, how does it not know that the table is a table? Well, that tries to address this. Like, you have the model, okay, but the model does nothing. It just exists visually speaking, but there is no dynamic to it, no logic to it. So my question specifically is, how can I add logic in that model? And then if it's used by another program that doesn't want to just display it, but has some kind of logic, have some kind of whatever additional to just the look, what it is. So that's why I insisted a little bit, because I know it's technical, but I think for this community, in terms of metadata, if we bring what text is, representation in XR, I think it's pretty important.
Yeah. So concretely, the way that is resolved is that all USD readers and writers are obliged to parse and carry through information about all prim types. Those are the primitives, and only some of the prims will be renderable. So that you're not obliged to do anything about all of them, but you're required to respect that they exist. And then there is an inheritance hierarchy given by the mnemonic liverpeas, which is the scene hierarchy import. So it's like, let me see what liverpeas is. The strength ordering is local, inherits, variants, references, payloads, and specializes. And so it's just a sort of a based on the conceptual function of overriding or applying data into a form. USD has a unified mechanism for resolving what that means, that the ground truth for this particular view of a hierarchy like that is. So there are overrides for function or intent or level of detail and things like that. Again, this has been made by Pixar for Pixar, but they've been kind enough to relinquish total control over it to this alliance for the purposes of being able to broaden the function of it. But it's going to be fascinating to see how it sort of intersects with some of these informational concerns.
Yeah, that's great. I expect, Leon, you have something specifically on this I can hold. You're laughing and talking, but you're muted.
Yeah, I noticed that I said I fully agree with everything, which was the same what I was saying a while ago. But anyways, yeah, this is actually why I also started XR Fragments, and to basically not just put metadata in there as informational metadata, but I call this executable metadata, so that it that you can do something, or the viewer can do something similar to what Reader does. It basically, that's also executable metadata. It steers the interface. And the only thing I wanted to sort of add to what Brendel and actually Mark also said, that Mark said something about linkability of data. I have been, what I've learned is that it's very easy to overlap certain features with what Apple is doing, or what Meta is doing, how they are trying to sort of like extend USD or GLTF. And so I think it will be necessary to sort of keep an eye on what they are doing. For example, the documentation which Brendel posted, the AR stuff for USD, because this changes very rapidly. So yeah, maybe if you're going to do more with metadata inside the 3D files, or you're going to do more with metadata in your text documents with BibTeX, then I think you have basically these three things to watch: your text file, and basically the BibTeX features, USDC extension features, and the GLTF features. And because this is pretty complex, I decided to only focus on SRC value and an href value and a tag value. So these three, I have limited XR Fragments totally like only to that, so that I don't have to look at all these other things. So there's a bit of a maybe a sort of dance involved here to find out, yeah, which features you're not going to focus on. And I think to be successful, sometimes you have to be you have to know what not to focus on.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, I have to ask two questions. Number one, within a reasonable effort, can we see the darn book in XR? And can we maybe relatively easily put this USD and Visual Meta relatively easily? Because otherwise it's a bit performative. I hate that term, but it's relevant. I don't want to just talk about being able to support this stuff, but can we do it or not? And can we view the book in XR? Everybody, please give me.
I can view the book in XR. I can view the book in XR anytime I want. I mean, I don't know. Sorry, like, you'll be able to do it soon.
Right. Okay, but it is unbearably frustrating not to be able to know the basic interactions. One thing that I cannot, I'm happy to have this recorded so that, obviously you haven't, this is why I'm so frustrated. You've never gone too far in telling stuff, but as a consumer and a developer, not to be able to know whether I can literally reach in and hold a document in Vision Pro is incredibly frustrating, because I know we can have these posters, but you know, there's that Pixar movie. What's the one where humanity goes to shit and there's a little robot running around? What's it called?
Wall-E.
That's
Wall-E,
it,
yeah.
Wall-E, right. It feels a bit like Wall-E World. I mean, hey, put a thing on your head. You're not allowed to move. You must twist your fingers and stare. I mean, for passive consumption, fine, but seriously? You know, it's an absolute insanity. I understand it's the first step. I'm totally with that. But, you know, I now have an app in Vision Pro. It launches in the thing. And there it is, as a poster flying off somewhere. So I sit and read my book like this, but can I do this? Can I do that? There's no documentation about it.
No, so you can the two modes, you know, according to Israel, but the person, Israel Pastrana Vicente, his WWDC video, it shows that you can interact at a distance where you have your head down on your lap and you get your pension. It just sees where you are. It doesn't need to pop in your field of view and stuff. Or you can tap on things directly. One of the things that, you know, all current headsets, and there's no reason to believe that anything else will be different for the foreseeable future, share in common is they have a fixed focal distance, and that people tend to have as a hedge between near enough to you to be able to do some kind of work, and far enough to be able to accommodate, you know, an approximate range of distance out into, you know, effectively infinite and things like that. If you only have one of those, if you only have one effective focus distance, then generally it needs to be outside of arm's reach in order to be able to accommodate in order for normal healthy vision to have the ability to accommodate at a further distance. And as we age, the capacity for accommodation sort of reduces and converges on a fixed distance somewhere out in front of us. And so, you know, a lot of people believe that it's necessary to have the sort of the primary sort of work distance to be close to that ideal accommodation distance, which is by necessity going to be a hedge. So yeah, direct manipulation is something that is technically capable on all of these platforms, but I don't know how much you've tried to use things inside arm's reach, inside a Quest 2 or a Quest Pro, but what I suspect you would experience is a significant discomfort over time as your eyes are fighting what's called this VAC, the Vergence accommodation conflict of having all of these cues saying this is this close, and your eyes trying to focus on it.
When I work with a headset, using a virtual screen, it is exactly a little bit outside of arm's reach, but I can at least reach it and put it where I want it and do the angling.
Yeah. So those things are all. It should be relatively clear from publicly available documentation that that's possible. And to be clear as well, with VAC, it's one of those things that is it's a transient effect. So it's not merely that, you know, you'll be set in a tailspin for days simply by having something closer than that primary accommodation distance. It's more like, again, sort of things like the ergonomics, where you can survive an interaction that requires your elbow to be up for about 5 minutes. And beyond that, it becomes an ergonomic nightmare. And so
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because of Beethoven. So I agree with you. Having a degree in ergonomics, I agree that obviously this is heavy for a few minutes, no question. However, we watched Beethoven's Fifth Symphony yesterday, and it has a conductor, right? So the conductor doesn't stand like this, but there's a huge amount of movement, and I know we agree on this, Brandl. I'm just saying to free up, not to have to do this, but to have a mix.
Right. No. So yeah, there are ways of achieving movement. I read a really great thing from one of our human factors researchers. It's a public post by a Microsoft researcher, but who is also was at one time a drum instructor. And he says drummers can do that all day because he used to do it all day. You do 8 hours of drumming. And the way you do that is by keeping your elbows down. You keep them, if on the hands of a clock, you keep them at between 5 and 7. And only for momentary things. You never keep your hand. You never keep your elbow past 5 o'clock.
And Brendel, this to me is basically what all of next year is about. This particular discussion. Because different parts of reading will require different things. So that's why I like the example of when you annotate, you can put it on your desk, even though it's going to be not optimal reading. At least you have the physical background, and then you should be able to spread into a wider graph view, and there you have to have the data. And that's why I really want to work with you guys with the USD, with all of that stuff, because first of all, we got to get our basic book in there. We got to have it to work with.
So in the context of the web, you have my personal guarantee. You'll be able to do whatever you want. Sort of. I mean, you'll have full hand tracking. You'll have the full positional tracking of your head, such that you'll be able to kind of define and position those things. With what we've discovered with Troika text and the ability to construct things largely on the fly, you'll have whatever kind of layout and creative capabilities that are there. It is still behind a developer flag, and so there will be some provisos as to what other APIs are there. That's not to be a reflection of the final goal of the thing, but merely to say, like, these are all the things that is a work in progress. USD is going to be able to do a lot of work for a lot of people, but one of the things that is important for people to recognize is the difference between USD and Quick Look. So Quick Look will not have all of the features that you want, but if you work with the ecosystem in a native context and you use USD, then you should be able to reach into those things to be able to add the additional capabilities as and where you desire. I have not done nearly as good a job of parsing and opening USD as I have done of writing, because most of the time I'm interested in generating things from the web rather than consuming them. So that's something that I haven't provided a lot of support of. I haven't even touched the USD importer. That's something that I'm hoping that more sort of technically diligent people than I will have the desire to kind of reach into and amend at such point as we make more specifications available.
I just added a word about USD there. I can see Mark is jumping at the bit.
Yeah, I just I'm going to pop in the sidebar really for Brendo, because I keep thinking of your comment about being given text that's unusable. So this is an old paper from '98 shoved in the Minter system, and why I'm interested is that when I look at it in the sort of web explorer, of course it looks like a bit of Twitter. It all the provenance tracking that's built onto the structure. And it loops back to a comment you slipped past us earlier when you mentioned that Blender and Maya are all basically visual design tools, and with an honourable exception to the work that Freud's done, I'm stumbling over this in virtually every area I'm dealing with that Word or its clones are just not good enough for the digital age as writing tools, because they're designed to write on paper. And broadly, we're not writing on paper anymore. And more to the point, we have needs. One of the interesting things is that I think we can now see that we have a need to have more of a sort of sidecar of metadata activity traveling along with us that isn't just an exhaust process. I have no answers for that, but I just wanted to sort of drag that and surface it, because again, it's pertinent to the stuff we want to put in to make it easier for the environment to consume. And I know sort of Freud's been perhaps ahead of us in some sense in this, but to put it in there, and it's obviously going to be iterative. I mean, part of it is we don't know what we want to put in there, which is another reason for I certainly keep trying to recover things that we might want to reuse, put them into a newer format to see what this tells me about what we didn't do right first time around. We can't get back and fix all the old stuff, but we can sure as heck not make the same mistakes again. Thanks.
I have to wrap up soon because I'm going to need a minute to get ready for Dini. And that means an espresso. Fabian, please.
It's good because there is no time, so it's just going to be a tease for next week, especially since Peter is not here. But missing pieces. But I got the links or one from the French startup links, and it works. So I'll leave it at that for this week.
Oh, come on. It works. Does it? Just spend a few seconds, man.
It works well. So I cannot tease too much because otherwise Peter, who is probably the most interested person, is going to be very disappointed.
Okay, we'll talk more next Monday then. Right, so the launch of the book, I'm thinking first week of December. So if anybody has anything they want put in there, give me at least a few days.
I'll try my best to comment at least on the Twitter aspect to it, because I think having it raw is interesting. Having it raw, like just a paragraph on top to comment on it, I think might be a good example maybe for next time for people who don't want to have more than this, and they were like, oh well, here it is. I'd rather I don't know, clarify more than the tweet. So I think it can be an interesting format. I don't want to promise, but I'll do my best to have like a couple of paragraphs.
That's really nice. And if any of you have other comments, it's just quite simply more fun when you read something and then you can click and go somewhere else. It's the most basic baby interaction. Click a button, but it really does work. Yeah, so I guess we should plan a some kind of a launch party, at least online. Are there any dates that are blocked off for you guys? Any Mondays? We should do it on a Monday, right? Should we do Monday the 4th?
That's great. That means I don't have to go to a meeting I didn't want to go to anyway.
Boom, I'm putting that down. And I gotta go. Dini's always early. Thank you very much, guys. I hope it was okay for you too, Rob. You were not saying much, but you were listening, and we're very, very glad you were here. Oh no, you're muted. That's why we didn't hear you. You were muted the whole time.
No, he's looking for the unmute.
Yeah.
I was definitely listening. This is a lot of this is new to me, and I feel like I'm trying to learn a new language. So I've had to figure out what a DMZ, no, a USDZ is.
Yes.
But I'm getting a sense of what's going to be possible, and I'm really excited about the possibilities here. So I'm going to hang in there. Also, you guys are great at talking. So, and I'm at this point probably better at listening than talking, but I really appreciate this group. And,
if I may, please, next time, do feel free to interrupt and ask. And if you don't feel like it, if you want to ask a question in the chat, even in private, I'm not saying I can answer, but me and I guess anybody else would happily, let's say, have a side conversation to try to dig a bit without breaking the flow. I think that's also an option.
Mark said something similar generally earlier. You're saying it now to Rob, and I would like to repeat it because asking questions doesn't show our ignorance, it shows our curiosity, and it also really helps people who think they know something. So if there's a very obvious question, it may very well spark a really interesting dialogue. So yeah, absolutely, many thumbs up for that.
Or that ghastly feeling that until that moment you thought you understood it and now you realize you don't.
Exactly.
I don't think I know anything, so it's not going to be a problem.
You're the wise one. See you soon, everyone.
We have a we have a mutual friend in Dana Staff. We should catch up sometime and
Really?
hang out and talk about. Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah.
were over at her place last night. Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyway, I just thought I would drop that.
Yeah,
in.
well, we
Nice
can,
small world.
do you have my email?
Yeah, I think so.
If not, I will do the routing. Hi, everyone.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry, Fred. Yeah.
Bye bye. Take care.